Good afternoon. My name is Tom Ellis. I am the current chapter president of the New England chapter of CMAA, and I would like to welcome you to our virtual presentation of a look at project delivery methods. We have a very distinguished panel today, and before I introduce our moderator, I'd like to just remind everyone that the attendees will be muted for the duration of the presentation. But you're invited to submit questions to our through the chat feature to one of our moderators. They'll review the questions and we'll move them forward to our moderator for consideration during the discussion. So we have a very good attendance today. We appreciate you participating in this very snowy day wherever you are. And from that point, I would like to turn it over to Maureen McDonough, who is our moderator for the panel, and she will introduce the panel to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, everyone. I'm Maureen McDonough, the Deputy Chief of Contract Services at the MBTA. I would like to welcome our audience, and I'd also like to thank CMAA for asking me to be the moderator of today's discussion. So I love construction and I love process, so I'm really looking forward to a good discussion about alternative delivery and how we do business. We're going to explore a number of methods: design, build, CM at risk. And you know, we want to ask ourselves and think about, why do we continually push to create a new and hopefully improved way of doing business, right? Why do we have more than one method available to us? I personally think of project delivery and the method that you choose as sort of one of the major and most critical risk mitigation decisions on a project, right? And we all know if we effectively distribute and manage our risks, our ability to be successful increases dramatically. So I'm excited to have a conversation about how and why we choose a particular delivery method for a particular project. So CMAA made my job very easy because they gave me a wonderful panel to hang out with for the next hour, including Dave, Luciana, Tricia, and Catherine. I'm going to ask each one of them to introduce themselves, and then we'll start our discussion with each of the panel members sharing and highlighting their decision-making, experiences, and lessons learned from using alternative delivery. After we hear from each of the panel members, we'll have some questions and discussion. We have so much to talk about. We have a very limited time, so I will do my best to incorporate questions that come in from the audience if we have any, but I'm going to apologize in advance if we don't get to any of all of them. So with that, I would like to get started. So Dave, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Shrestinian. I am Director of Program Management at City Point Partners. I've been with City Point for, it's almost 6 months now. Prior to that, I spent the previous 35 years of my career as a construction manager, delivering projects under various delivery methods, including CM at risk, design, bid, build, and even one IPD project.
Great, thank you. Luciana? You know, hello. Luciana only needs a first name. We don't even say Birdie. Sorry, go ahead, Luciana.
Good afternoon. It's 12:04, so I can say good afternoon to everybody. Luciana Burdi, the director as of this past Monday of the Capital Program Department for Massport. We own, manage, and operate 3 airports and the Port of Boston, you know, the container terminal. Before I've been a Massport for 8.5 years. Before then, I was 8 years at DCAM. So we went through, you know, we did, I think Massport did only one design build, pre-Luciana. Probably Catherine was here when they did the design build,
yep.
Right?
That's right.
So I worked both at DCAM and here on a lot of CM risk and design bid build. And there are chapter 30, but for this discussion, we consider that design bid build. Thank you. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, Luciana. Tricia?
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm very happy to be here today. I am the Vice President of Business Development and Client Services at Suffolk Construction. I've been here for about 9 months. Before that, I was an owner for many years. Over 32 years, I've spent time, about 20 years in state government, working for over 12 years at the MWRA and 8 years at UMass. And then I've spent a lot of time in the last 13 years working in higher education at both Harvard, where I worked with Maureen, MIT, the Broad Institute, as well as UMass. So happy to be here today and share my experiences as an owner.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce my good friend Catherine and her Christmas tree. She is bringing the holiday cheer to our luncheon this afternoon. So, Catherine, would you please introduce yourself?
Just sharing the joy of the Christmas tree and not thinking about all the snow outside. So thanks for having me. My name is Catherine Walsh, and I'm an Associate Vice President in the Facilities Division. And so I'm responsible for contracting and working with our design and construction group in terms of procurement and contracts. Project controls also is in my group. And so I've been at Northeastern for 8.5 years. Prior to that, I was at Massport for 15 years. So I have a good mix of public and private. And I have to say, when I came over to Northeastern, it was a real adjustment about how we procured work and how loose we were with regard to it. And, my neck still bristles at some things, but, we are doing a lot of different ways, a lot of CM at risk, some design build, trying to move more towards design bid build. And so I'm really interested in sort of sharing what we do and speaking with the other panelists about how they do business as well. So thanks, Maureen.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. So thanks for the introductions. I'd like to go back to Dave. We'll start with Dave. Can you share a few thoughts, Dave, about your experience with alternative delivery?
Well, I prepared to speak mostly about construction management at risk. And why that could be a preferred method for a client, why owners would make that decision. And really choosing the right delivery method, it's one of the most critical decisions an owner can make. I'd put it right up there with picking the right project team. For each one of these delivery methods we're going to discuss today, there are different levels of risk assumption and contractual obligation and management requirements. So when an owner is choosing a method, they really need to make sure that they're equipped to deal with all of those implications, that they can tolerate the risk level for that method, that they can assume all of the contractual obligations that go along with the method, because they do vary, and that they have the staff, the systems, the culture to manage the project successfully. For some projects and owners that meet a certain profile, CM at risk can be a very good method, because it hedges the risk for the owners and it helps them navigate through the project delivery, both through design and construction. So why would an owner choose that method over another one? What benefits do they get? And what projects are good candidates for CM at risk? What criteria? What are the drivers that make CM at risk a good choice? Usually it's schedule, it's time, or more accurately, a lack of time. That's the driver. A project gets approved, it's released, and there's a hard end date, and there just isn't a lot of time. There's not a lot of time for design and construction, and there certainly isn't the timeline that you want for design, bid, and build. So you want to fast track the project. You want to overlap the design and the construction, maybe split the permit to get in the ground early with the foundations. But maybe there's all this enabling work that needs to be done. There's demolition, there's abatement before the demolition, there's utilities to clear out of the site, there's soils to remediate. And then there's all these long lead items that need to get purchased to have the materials on site on time for the construction. So the benefit of having a CM on board early becomes pretty evident. So time is really a driving force for this method. Another driver is complexity, which introduces uncertainty and risks for not only schedule, but also cost and quality. For some projects, particularly large projects in urban environments, there's challenging logistics. There may be phasing requirements, sophisticated technical requirements with specialized construction systems or methods. There could be special goals like net zero or passive house, which require builders with specialized expertise. So how do you get all of those requirements into bid documents, especially in a shortened time frame? Again, the CM on board early would surely be helpful. Then another consideration on picking your method is just the owner profile, their organization, their tolerance for risk, and their culture. And that's often a function of what industry they're in or the type of enterprise they are, commercial versus institutional, a private corporation versus a public agency. And for some owners, there's just a stronger need or stronger desire to have more cost certainty and the comfort of CM pricing during pre-construction, the GMP earlier in the process rather than waiting for bid results. And also a need for more schedule certainty, where you're getting a schedule that's developed with CM input and being validated. And then there's just plain operating within a comfort zone. Institutional habit, doing things the way they've always been done, depending upon existing relationships, trusted relationships. CM at risk's been around for a while, so maybe the owners used it before and the management systems are set up for it. And there's no in-house staff to administer the project otherwise. So CM at risk is the default decision. So these are all reasons CM at risk may be a good choice for an owner. And what benefits do they get? They get to pick the project team the way they want to. They get the input during design. So they should be getting better documents that are informed with constructability and logistics and means and methods. They should get more budget and schedule certainty earlier in the project, which can be critical for making decisions or even moving the project forward. Administration of a GMP affords more financial transparency with open book accounting, and the CM should be acting as a partner, helping them manage the project. Also, with the CM on board early, a project should be able to leverage and benefit more from innovation during pre-construction and design. So things like BIM, lean, design assist prefabrication, for example. So those are some of the drivers and hope for benefits that owners would be factoring into their choice of a project delivery system. And for CM at risk, it's a faster schedule, more cost certainty, more managed risk, and a good project experience.
Great. Thanks, Dave, very much. Appreciate that. Luciana, would you like to share some of your thoughts and experiences on alternative delivery?
Sure. For those people who are, they know my passion and my expertise, to me, it's at the end, it's how we are implementing a lot of these delivery, these delivery processes. Is definitely the CMAR risk is the one more conducive to innovation, right? To including lean practices, BIM, VDC. But at some level, I think I'm advocating for the fact that in all delivery methods, these technologies and this innovation can be applied. Could be harder, could be easier. You know, in an ideal IPD, right, is the easiest. The closest to IPD that you can get is design built, but you know, design built not, let's say, within the limitation of the MGL for public owner that's out in Massachusetts, right? But to me, it does not mean that we can do innovation in all the delivery methods. And we, Massport, developed, we have BIM addendas for both CMAR risk and design bid builds, right? We have lean, we implemented lean on both levels. But as an owner, we understood the limitation. what I'm arguing and what I am advocating all the time to all the owners is that you need to know what you are asking. And oftentimes the CM can become the advisor, OPM, whatever, it depends which type of CM definition you take. There is a CMAA definition, right, which is closer to OPM, or the CM definition of the MGL, Massachusetts General Law, which is an elevator contractor. So I think if you embrace this and you help the owner, at the end, you can implement all of it, and you can become as efficient as you can and as you want. But we also need to understand that you pay for it. The owner pays for it, right? So if you are asking to do in a design bid build, right, the easiest one, that you're asking to implement VDC, if the owner does not know what to do with the model after they get it, just don't ask for it, because you're going to pay for it, right? So this is where I think the knowledge, I'm always advocating for owners before they ask anything, especially BIM, VDC, innovation, and lean, to be educated, to know. We don't have to know as much as the Revit master can know, but we need to know what Revit can give me before I ask for Revit, because Revit might be the wrong tool to ask for, right? And so, sorry, someone just came. So this is where, this is where I think some of the benefit is, it's educating on each of the delivery methods, what can be achieved. I always say, do not, just try to do more that you can. When I was at DCAM and I tried to implement the first state lean project, I heard so many people telling me that I could not do it. Guess what? I was able to do it on a little prison in the Western Mass in 2009. People were telling me you cannot do BIM. 2004, we were able to do it. So nothing is impossible if there is a willingness, the time, and if you put yourself in it.
Thank you, Luciana. Tricia, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yes, I'd love to. So, the public partnership delivery method is the best way to combine the best of both worlds, the public and the private entities, to benefit public and private institutions. So this is an innovative way to deliver a project. It saves time on money and schedule, and it allows in some cases to bring the whole team together in the beginning to design the actual asset or the building one time, which is huge savings and benefit to the owner. Some of the reasons why we've seen some institutions look in the direction of a public-private partnership is the cost savings and the financing capabilities. A lot of institutions are debt constrained and have billions of dollars in deferred maintenance. They lack funding for public universities, state and local governments, and private institutions are at their debt capacity as well. So the lower the development costs with the faster and more streamlined delivery, it's a win-win. In some cases, you can de-risk the project where you get construction guarantees by the developer and you pass along the risk to the CM. And the construction risk and the demand risk is alleviated if you have this private developer actually own the facility. So they're taking on the construction risk and also the demand risk of actually filling the beds if it's student housing. And it's a real way to be able to leverage the development expertise of someone who's actually done this before. If you look at institutions in higher ed, they may only build a residence hall once in 10 or 15 years. So why not partner with a national developer or a local developer who's actually built housing before? Colleges and universities aren't in the business of building housing. And if housing is done right and built efficiently and operated efficiently, you can negotiate terms and agreements that are beneficial to you. Everyone knows housing is a cash cow, but if you look around to institutions of housing that they built in the 60s and 70s, they've taken that cash from the students and not necessarily put it back into deferred maintenance. So this gives discipline to a process that may not exist today. There won't be a way, if you build student housing on an equity transaction or a 501c3 transaction, those revenues will go into a reserve for capital renewal, or an equity owner will put it into renewal of that building. And there won't be asks from people at the university and ask on that unrestricted net asset, that cash flow. The cash flow will actually stay in the auxiliary and benefit the actual housing for years to come. So it's definitely a win-win. There's different ways to do public-private partnerships. You could do an equity transaction where 90% of the actual financing of that is probably done through a private placement of taxable debt, and there's 10%, up to 10% of equity put in by the actual developer. So they have skin in the game. Those transactions could be 65 to 99 years. You could create a nonprofit 501c3 entity and stand up a nonprofit entity to own and lease the asset, probably for about 40, 45 years. You'll issue tax-exempt debt and oversee the payment. The owner of the property, the 501c3, will oversee the payment of the debt, the operating expenses. The private operator, they'll maintain reserves required by the bondholders and bond compliance. In today's day, post-COVID, they'll be looking probably for additional reserves and may be more costly and harder to finance a project that way. But, that might just be around for the next 12 months or so. But hopefully once we get used to the new world and pivot, that will come back, that market. You can do a design, build, finance, and maintain the asset by a private operator by setting up a special purpose vehicle that essentially receives the availability payment from the public entity. And then they'll operate, maintain, and pay back the investor for the capital infusion to underwrite the asset. And it's typically funded with a taxable debt due to this special purpose vehicle structure. You can have a concessionaire agreement where the public entity owns the asset and receives funding to efficiently operate and maintain the asset. The demand risk and the revenue available to fund it is borne by the owner. The owner lowers its operating costs with a private entity, a private operator efficiently, and is disciplined to maintain the asset and alleviate the deferred maintenance backlog. The operator is kept in check with their KPIs and deduct from their fee for non-performance. And then you have the traditional delivery methods of design, bid, build, or CM at risk that we're speaking to today.
Great. Thank you very much, Tricia. Appreciate those comments. Catherine, as you mentioned, Northeastern does, maybe uses almost all of these. So would you please sort of share your thoughts and insights?
Sure. So first of all, a lot of head nodding to all of you. And so I feel like Northeastern is like a buffet, right? And so CM at risk is really our main course. We do probably 80–90% of CM at risk for many of the reasons that Dave talked about. A lot of our projects are fast paced. We identify a principal investigator coming in for a new lab. We need to construct it very quickly. A lot of times we don't know about the pre-existing conditions. And so the CM at risk really is a great partnership with a CM that we trust and, have developed relationship to be able to help us scope that work with the designer, help with the constructability, and then really the phasing that Dave talked about to be able to start to do the abatement, do the demo while we're still designing, what the space will look like. So we definitely do a lot of CM at risk. And then I would say design build is becoming more like our side dish. We started doing design build up in Burlington, and the rationale behind the design build was we had a donor up there that wanted to build the Costas Research Institute, and he gave us a set amount of money and he told us we will be doing it design build. And so we figured it out. We developed new contracts to be able to do that. And in the eyes of the clients up in Burlington, they believed it was very successful. Facilities and the people maintain it had maybe a less positive experience, but overall we delivered the building. It was a building that worked as it was intended to work. The donor was happy, and the clients or the customers up in Burlington were happy. Coincidentally, we have a new building that we just finished construction, and the same staff up in Burlington wanted to do it design build again. And I have to say the design build wasn't like what I would call a rigorous design build. And my design build experience before that was exactly what Luciana was talking about. It was the I'm going to say runway extension. I can't remember. We're not allowed to say runway extension, right? But anyway, we did a design build there, and as an owner, we spent a lot of time up front about developing the program and being very clear about what we wanted, and more importantly, very clear about what we wanted in terms of quality. And so, there's a lot of upfront programming that the owner has to do to be able to use the design build contract, because to some extent, you have to release control a little bit. And if you're a controlling owner, like Massport was and like Northeastern, sometimes the design build can be tricky. But I say that it's our side dish now because we're doing a lot more of it. And the rationale for doing it is really, we are doing work, a lot more work outside of Boston. We're doing work in London, we're doing work in Canada, we're doing work on the West Coast. And the design build has given us a better opportunity to have the designer and the builder work together. We're not as familiar with permitting, the affidavits are different, a lot of the construction requirements are different, and so the design build has served us very well. And we pair that with an OPM so that we don't have to provide a ton of support coming out of Boston. And so our latest design build will be the development of a campus that we're building in London. And then, and I guess I'll say that, design, bid, build is dessert. So, you always sort of forget about dessert because I spend too much time on the sides and the appetizers, right? And, I came from, 14 years of design, bid, build. And when I got to Northeastern, we did very little of it. But there is a recent push over the past few years to do more of that, particularly in the deferred maintenance area where, the scopes are pretty definable: roofing work, utility work, those types of activities. And also there has definitely been a greater interest in cost containment and knowing what the costs are up front. And so we have done a few design, bid, builds, and it's been very positive. We know what the pricing is when it comes in. If we want to accept alternates, we do that. So it does give us some flexibility, but where it really helps us is cost control for some clients around the university. So I'm happy to talk about either methods. There's some really good things about some of them, not so good things about other. But I think you have to look at each situation. For us, we have to figure out what is the goal. Second, what is their tolerance for risk and budget overruns or something like that. And then I think as a group, we need to figure out how we do it. And then I'll just quickly say we're on our second P3, and that's been really great. The first one was a learning experience for all of us. The contractual mechanisms are very complex. Understanding where our role is and where the developer's role was very hard for Northeastern. Trying to make the distinction about what is this housing is on our campus, but it's not run by us. And what does that mean in terms of services that we provide the students? Like, I can tell you, when we opened up that dorm, Lightview, the first month, we kept getting calls. They're like, can you do an event setup? The heat isn't here. We're like, we can't, we're not allowed to come into that building. And so we were all panicked that at some point we'd be getting a call from the president to be like, get your asses over there, but it's been respectful. The first month was a little tricky and we had to say, sorry, we can't come. But, it looks like Northeastern. People think of it as Northeastern. It's just that, yay, we don't have to maintain it. So that's great. And so we're doing another P3 right now for housing. And I think what Tricia said, housing is perfect. It's not like you're building a lab. It's somewhat cookie cutter, at the risk for all the people who are listening that are designers for dorm housing. I guess I would say it's less complex than some of the lab and science building projects that we work on. So thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So now I would like to just start some conversation, have some questions. And so I was thinking, this was good. A lot of you have experience with the different methods, but there seems to be, obviously a lot of use of CM at risk. And I'm just curious, when you're thinking about what delivery method to use, do you do sort of an analysis project by project, or do you get used to using a delivery method? I'm going to steal David's term of institutional habits. Do you develop institutional habits? And it's like, we do CM at risk, so we do CM at risk. I'm just curious how that decision-making process works. And whoever wants to start can start.
So this is Luciana. I can start and then someone else can jump in. And, you know, Maureen, tell me if I need to stop because I always have an opinion, so it doesn't matter. So, so for us, in some way, is easier because we have the limitation of the MGL, right? If we are supposed to do anything that's more than 5 million CMAR risk, right? But we do continue to evaluate all the time. You know, we'll say, okay, is that the best approach that we can do? For big projects, we say yes, because it is for everything that David and Catherine and Patricia said. But for example, for the roadway, we have a B2C connector roadway. We debated, should we do a design build or should we do a chapter 30? We ended up with chapter 30, knowing that we had to coordinate. There were different phases. So we are now, if it was design built, you know, that, again, it's a roadway, with all the respect with all of you who are designing roadways.
We've alienated a third on the call.
We have underpass, we have overpass, it's not really road, but you know what I mean. So we could have a choice because that's a huge project. And we could, I was advocating and say, why don't we do design build, right? It sounded more, it's a huge, it's long, over, it's impact, and why do we have to get into coordinating the different contractor? At the end, because of cost, because of also the project team that I think David mentioned too, you know, we had David Doan dedicated to that project. He's one of our top project manager. To all the project managers, Master are here, you're all great, but David is the one best for that project. We also have other support that we gave him, we provide him to make sure that the connection, you know, at the same time, we are also doing Terminal C canopy, B2C connector, so we are all there. There is a bigger team that try to coordinate all of these efforts. If we were not equipped by those knowledge, that would have been harder for us to pick probably chapter 30.
Okay, all right, thank you. Catherine, you mentioned you use a number of different types. So is it a project by project analysis? Is it a little, but you also said a lot of CM at risk. So
yeah, so I think it's what David said. It's a little institutional sort of habit. And so a lot of it is projects come up very quickly and the design isn't far enough along, or we don't have the time to hard bid it. And so, and then also because our buildings are so constrained and often there's construction in other areas, we feel like to be able to coordinate with other contractors that are in the area, that the CM at risk allows for more collaboration than the design bid build. And I have to say, you know, we have a great partnership with a variety of CMs, and the sort of established relationship has been effective in how we deliver projects. So I do think we default to that, but there are definitely discussions about, you know, is CM at risk the best, and should we hard bid it, and is design build, you know, obviously P3, it's all about housing. We wouldn't do a P3 for anything else, but you know, so I would say in general, Maureen, there's not a lot of thought. If something's out of the norm of a regular project, then there's a discussion about what's the best method for delivery. And there was lots of discussions about how we deliver some of this work out of the Boston area, where we're all less familiar with sort of the construction and design culture in those areas.
yeah, I thought that was a really interesting comment that you made, that you have this advantage when, you know, bringing in, when you don't have the local expertise yourself, right? That was sort of
Yeah.
another thing you might not think of as a benefit. So Catherine, I loved your
Well,
analogy.
let me just add one other thing, Maureen. You know where they've been really helpful is, like, we can't use our design and design build agreements and CM at risk agreements. They're not tailored to Canada or London. And so the design firms have been really helpful in, helping us. Obviously, it's a little skewed toward them, but they're helping us with the contractual obligations that are required or are required as part of the law in wherever we're at.
Okay, great. So I loved your comment about a buffet, right? Because like, who doesn't love a buffet?
I know.
And I never skip dessert, unfortunately. But so we have these number of delivery methods, and we just talked about sort of the decision making, because some of you use some of them, but not all of them, and not all of them to a great extent. And I'm curious, how much does your internal skill and resources play into whether you would be more willing to sort of try something that you haven't done before or you haven't done a lot of? So Trish, you want to?
Sure. Based on my experience at UMass, we've just invested about $3 billion they've invested about $3 billion over the last 15 years into their systems on each of their 5 campuses. And, in some of the larger schools, they have expertise in-house, but really doing CM at risk was how they did most of their projects, with the exception of the 2 housing projects that were done as a public-private partnership. But really bringing in the expertise that they don't have in-house was very important. Having an owner's project manager in all of the projects, bringing in the architect, and getting the CM in as early as possible to help with pre-con, and just making sure they're thinking about everything from a design perspective accordingly. And what was important from a control perspective at UMass was having a known budget number. So really, having early look at what the design is and what the cost is, and having the CM come in and do that second set of pricing, and the reconciliation was critical. Unless the project was very simple, on very few occasions did they use design bid build. And in the UMass Building Authority basically oversaw all the construction, but one of their clients was each of the campus. So as many of you worked with the UMass Building Authority and UMass over the years, you had many people that you were trying to please.
Okay, great. I want to follow up a little bit. Dave, I might put you on the spot, because as we all know, owners scrutinize, right, who their business partners are. We get qualifications and proposals. And I always love to ask consultants whether or not you scrutinize who you do business with as much as we attempt to scrutinize who we do business with. So when you're thinking about your clients, do you find that they have a similar knowledge or understanding of alternative delivery? And if not, if it's different, does that have you shy away if they have more or less, or do you sort of adjust what services you're capable of bringing to sort of match with what they need? Similar to what Tricia was talking about, let the experts help you.
Well, the knowledge level varies widely, right? So we have folks on the panel here who are clients, and they are very sophisticated. They have a broad range of knowledge. And other clients don't build projects very often, so they may not necessarily have a broad base of knowledge, but they may have the understanding if the alternatives are presented to them properly, objectively. So I think it really depends upon understanding the client's needs, what's important to them, what's driving them, and also their culture, how much they're going to value what we what we bring to the table, the suggestions we make, whether they're going to listen, but they're going to make their decisions based on what works for them. They have requirements, they have governance, they may have other reasons to pick a delivery method that would be different than what we would choose, and we need to respect that, and we just need to see if we can get on the same page. And if we can get on the same page and we can add value, then I'd work with them. And if we find that we just cannot agree, that our expectations of what's going to be successful diverge so much, then maybe, you know, it's just not a good fit. So I think it's about the fit. But I would certainly, you know, for the right client, tailor our designs to what they need.
Okay, great. So I'd like to pose another question for all of you. So a number of years ago, I actually completed a collaborative law certificate program. And the premise of that program, it was created in family law, right? So you can imagine. So the premise of the program was that relationships matter, right? And they're important in order to be successful. So one, I'm just curious, I don't want to assume you all agree that relationships matter, but do you agree? But the other is, do you think that any one of these delivery methods facilitates the ability to create better relationships on projects?
So I guess I'll jump in, because relationships matter in a big way to Northeastern. And I think if you have good relationships, we have a better ability to deliver on sort of more difficult jobs, more time constrained, maybe more cost constrained jobs. And so I should say that probably, you know, if we have a particularly difficult job, and usually when I say difficult, it's they want it delivered by a certain time frame, right? So whether it's by the end of the Christmas break or over the summer or some unreasonable deadline, we go to CM at risk because we can start the work early. You know, they've all agreed to our contracts, and so we have a lot of the upfront stuff that comes off the plate. And then what we do really is say, you know, who has the best ability to do this? So we look at who's worked in that building, who's worked on a similar project, who doesn't have a lot of work with us now. And, you know, it enables us to like reach out to these people and for them to be honest with us about, can they deliver this? Like, this is the unrealistic schedule that we're going to ask you to meet. And we've had CM say, you know, we can't do that, you know, and they know that if they say no, it's not going to be held against them. Like, they're being honest with us. And I think that because we have an existing relationship, there's the ability for them to be honest with us. And so I think that the CM at risk has allowed us to use the CMs in that way to be able to deliver on tightly constrained projects, whether it's timing or budget.
Okay. Great.
I think I just want to chime in that, you know, relationships are important. It's about trust, and it's about mutual respect. But we also have to think, I think, of ways that we can broaden, you know, the number of firms that can participate in projects. And if we have one delivery method where everything large and sophisticated keeps going to the same folks because they have the best qualifications, then how do we broaden opportunity for other people? So I think that relationships are important, but when looking at, you know, who you're going to bring to your team, I think you have to have a very open mind and think of a way that you can evaluate others as well.
Okay. Thank you.
And I would say we have a big pool of CMs. You know, we've got like 20 in our pool, and you're absolutely right. There are jobs that are ripe to try new people, to try and introduce more diversity. And, you know, we spend a lot of time doing that, trying to pick the right jobs to build capacity for some of these smaller, diverse firms. And so, you know, I guess Northeastern is lucky because we have such a diverse portfolio. You know, we have lots of big projects, but we have even more smaller projects where it's really ripe to bring in new firms, and particularly new diverse firms.
Okay, great. Luciana, I want to come back to you for a moment and follow up on something you said before, because I absolutely agree with you that the owner needs to know what they want. I mean, it seems very basic, but it's often a challenge, right? Excuse me. And I think, we've learned over the years that sometimes, sorry, I'm going to take a drink of water. Sorry, thank you. Sometimes where we spend the least amount of time is upfront planning, programming, feasibility, right? And really trying to define what we want. So I'm curious if you think, acknowledging that's often a problem for owners, is there any one of the delivery methods that you think is more beneficial in either improving success when the owner doesn't really know, or in helping the owner work out and articulate their expectations?
So I do believe that probably CMAR risk modified with some, for owners that do not have the expertise, having what David calls an OPM, what CMAA calls CM, it's fundamental from my perspective, because those are the people that the owner, first of all, the owner needs to acknowledge what they know and what they don't know, right? And then after they do, they have to find someone who's complementary to them. And so they can benefit from their knowledge, and they can bring in the OPM that complements whatever they don't know. And they have to, you have no idea how many times I spend talking to owners saying, oh yeah, we asked for BIM. I said, great, what are they going to do with it? Oh, I don't know. I was like, don't ask them.
Yeah.
Again, there are things that we owner hear around, and we pretend we know, while we don't get into the root cause and the root understanding of what we actually know. So I do think that the CMAR risk and modified CMAR risk, IPD, design build / IPD could be a good method to understand. I still remember a DCAM, and that's something that I would like to do at Massport as well. The project manager at DCAM was spending 3-4 months, me as a project manager, to research, to come up with a program before we advertise for a consultant, right? Massport consultant in and help them use, but I think we do have the expertise. I have architects, I have engineers that have done this before. So, and by doing that, we might be able to be better situated to understand what type of consultant we need, what type of sub-consultant we need, what type of CM we need, and what type of trades. So this is my view of the world on that.
Okay, thanks. And then Dave, I'm just curious, the role of the OPM. Can you help an owner, articulate their expectations, define their expectations? Is that part of what you bring as part of your services?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the role of the OPM. Really needs to think and act on behalf of the owner. It's also, I think, very valuable if the OPM also understands how design teams and builders also think and act. I think you can really, to make a project successful, use this technique called conditions of satisfaction, where you really just you formally dig into what everybody expects out of a project to make it successful, especially the owner, right? Not only what the final product is going to be, but also what the process is going to be. Get those expectations understood as clearly as you can and document them, and then develop a method to monitor that, people's performance along the way. Are we meeting those? I think another way to make sure that you're going to satisfy those conditions of satisfaction is to have a really formalized risk management strategy. Come up with a risk register, and this is a way you can kind of leverage everybody's expertise on the entire project team. everybody's coming to the project with their own view, but their own experiences. And just think of anything that might happen before it happens that could jeopardize those conditions of satisfaction, and get them down and review them and think of ways that you can manage those issues ahead of time. So yeah, that's definitely the role of the OPM.
Okay, great, thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about COVID, right? And whether or not COVID impacts your decision-making process for which delivery method to use. And maybe a little bit too with Tricia and Catherine, you guys were talking about P3s, but you're talking about housing on campuses. And we all know that we have a lot of remote learning going on, right? So just curious if you've seen or you expect to see, you know, COVID impacting decision-making on project delivery selection.
I would expect that we would continue to see people utilizing the public-private partnership as a tool to provide housing or any other type of asset, as they're more of these institutions are more financially constrained. So it's just a way that the institutions can leverage other people's money to provide an asset that is self-sustaining and has a revenue source that can be used to underwrite that particular asset. And, you know, whether it's student housing or an energy facility, I think we'll see more and more of that coming as we look at ways to be more efficient. And as we see more assets that are outdated and have a lot of deferred maintenance. And, you know, as far as, I think now we got through the fall semester, we have the spring semester coming up. I think hopefully the vaccination helps in that we'll get back to some kind of new normal shortly. But these needs still exist in all these campuses, and there's such a long lead time of putting an RFQ out there to get a development team in place to do a public-private partnership, that we see a little bit of a slowdown for a couple of months, but I see it picking up in the first of the year. And by the time things get back financially to some normalcy, you know, we'll be ready to put these projects into place and can put a shovel in the ground.
Okay.
So I agree with Tricia. You know, the housing is, we're always going to have students. It's funny because people are like, oh, are you going to pause on your P18 P3? And no, I mean, we have not seen a decline in housing. We expect the housing. We still have a commitment with the city, and this really is the best way for us to deliver on that housing. And also agree with the energy. We're partnering with an energy firm to begin to look at outsourcing a bunch of this stuff, helping us with some of the energy conservation measures implementation. And so, you know, we're marching down that path, and really at the direction of the president. He's been very clear that our mission is education, and that, you know, housing is ancillary, energy is ancillary. We should be spending our capital on research facilities, laboratory facilities to bring research to the university. The other thing I'll say about the COVID stuff, and it's day-to-day stuff, like when you have somebody who's positive on a job site. And so, you know, we're spending over $50 million to implement the testing program that we have in place. The students test 3 times a week, we test twice a week. And so the fact that we have somebody on our campus that tests positive and they're not in our testing pool, the awareness is very heightened across campus. And so I feel like the situations where it has occurred, the CMs have been amazing. They've reported it, they've dealt with it, they've communicated. You know, they have the COVID plans with the city. We have it's called a SPA process. It's the site presence approval process. And we require them to submit a plan about how they will segment from the Northeastern community, because they're not in our testing pool. And so they're respecting that. You know, we figure out where they eat lunch, which bathrooms they come in, where materials and they come in and out of sites, so that there's not a lot of crossover. And so I have to say, you know, there's obviously additional costs related to that. And so the CM at risk, I think, has been a mechanism to allow us for us to compensate the CMs for this sort of extra level of care that we're requiring on our campus. But I'll tell you, people were really nervous about it, and I've been pleasantly surprised about how seriously people are taking it.
All right. Well, I have to tell you, believe it or not, our hour has like flown by, right? We are pretty much out of time. Tom's gonna come back and join us again. Thanks, you guys. This has
Thank you.
been fun for me.
Thank you.
I love this stuff, and I love to get a little smarter by listening to all of you. And Tom, I will turn it back over to you.
Great. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you. This has been really great. You know, you guys are like super users of different delivery methods, and I think it's a great conversation to hear, you know, kind of what works and what you're thinking about as different types of delivery methods are being used and decided on. So anyway, but again, thank you, Maureen, Luciana, David, Catherine, Tricia. You guys it was fantastic. It's great. Like you said, this hour flew by. So anyway, on behalf of the CMAA New England Chapter Board of Directors and our over 580 members, I want to thank you. I would like to thank everyone for participating in it. We had a really outstanding number of participants. I think it was well pushing like over 190 people. So it was great. I'd like to thank all our sponsors. Our sponsors are the ones who help us run the chapter. This year has been challenging financially for everyone, but we've been able to maintain our primary purpose, which is scholarships for CM students. And so, you know, and also been able to have these online sessions, you know, without charge. And so right now the board of directors are saying, you know, we're just trying to share information. Right now, it's a tough time. It's a great opportunity for people to connect. And so if you're not a sponsor, please consider do so. And if you are a sponsor, we look forward to you renewing your sponsorship. It really helps our chapter. And, you know, we're here for developing, you know, the profession within the greater New England area, but also helping CM students. So again, that's why we're here, and we appreciate everyone's participation today. So again, thank you for the panel, and thank you to all you that participated and watched the session today. So anyway, one last mention I'd like to say is before the session started, there was some information about the Mark Hasso Scholarship. Our chapter has been really proud to put that in place. We've exceeded the $100,000 goal for that scholarship in his name. Before the end of the year, Wentworth will match it dollar for dollar. So if you personally have not contributed, or if your company has not, please consider doing so. It's really, you know, again, it's all about helping students and also the memory of Mark Hasso. He was a phenomenal charter member of our organization, but also a great teacher and friend and mentor to many people in the Boston area. So again, thank you for participating, and we look forward to seeing you next time. So thank you.
Everyone,
Thank
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Just a bit.